Ukrainian refugee on a Charlotte train should face the death penalty. The president took to Truth Social to weigh in on the attack. Trump called the 23-year-old Irina Zarutska, quote, beautiful young lady from Ukraine who came to America searching for peace and safety. Trump referred to the perpetrator as a, quote, animal before calling for his execution. The president added, quote, there can be no other option. The Justice Department has charged the suspect with a federal crime that could carry the death penalty. The federal charge follows questions about why the suspect, DeCarlos Brown Jr., was on the street. Brown had 14 prior criminal arrests before he was accused of killing Zarutska in an attack captured on video. President Trump's nominee for Federal Reserve Governor Stephen Miran has advanced through the Senate Banking Committee. Here's that man with a long history of violence and reported mental illness has sparked renewed scrutiny over soft on crime policies, as well as how the law deals with troubled homeless individuals. Joining us now to talk about the relationship among crime, mental illness, and homelessness, and how the system could be failing both victims and perpetrators is Michelle Stieb, founder of the Free Up Foundation and author of Answers Behind the Red Door, Battling the Homeless Epidemic. Her book is based on her 13 years as CEO of Northern California's largest program for homeless women and children. She is also a visiting fellow with the Discovery Institute's Fix Homelessness Initiative. So first of all, good afternoon, Michelle. Thank you for coming on the show. So the Charlotte mayor.
Good afternoon.
Yes. So let me read you a quote from the Charlotte mayor. She says, "We will never arrest our way out of issues such as homelessness and mental health." She says mental health disease is like a disease like any other that needs to be treated with the same compassion like cancer or heart disease. Do you agree, disagree with what she said, or somewhere in between?
I agree that mental illness is a disease and that it needs to be treated with compassion. But here's the issue. In our nation's homelessness system in 2013, under a different administration, obviously, we decided that we were no longer going to fund mental illness treatment, addiction treatment, employment training, that we were only going to, under a one-size-fits-all approach, fund housing subsidies. Housing subsidies do not fix homelessness in and of themselves. There's a lot of accompanying issues with homelessness, including mental illness, including substance abuse disorder. Actually, about 80% of the homeless population struggle with those issues. So what's happened over the last 12 years is we've only treated homelessness through giving people keys to a house, is those diseases have gone untreated. And when diseases go untreated, just like cancer or heart disease, they get worse. And what has happened is we've got a lot of people who were sick at the point that we rolled this out who are even sicker. And when you get more mentally ill and you get more, deeper in your disease of substance abuse, you are much more likely to commit crimes. And that's exactly, I believe, what we're seeing in the case of Irina, which is just so horrific and so sad and so preventable. But I do want to point out that this president's executive order a couple weeks ago, you and I discussed that, has turned the ship in the right direction. What he has said through that executive order is we need to treat mental illness, we need to treat addiction. That has to be the priority for federal funding as it relates to homelessness. And in doing that, we're going to make our streets much more safe. We're going to give the homeless the opportunity to live the lives they were intended to live. And we are going to prevent crimes like we just witnessed horrifically with Irina.
Okay, Michelle, I just want to stay on this point a little bit longer. So you're saying, as the mayor said, that mental illness is the same as like diseases like cancer. Those two are the same, you're saying?
Mental illness is actually classified as a disease of the brain, as is substance abuse disorder, by the CDC. It's a legitimate disease of the brain. And so, yes, it is a disease. I'm not saying we treat mental illness and addiction like we treat cancer. What I'm saying is They are diseases, and when they are left untreated, they get worse. And we're seeing that all over. The most recent example is Irina's demise.
Is there a connection between homelessness and crime?
1,000%, though I really want to qualify. We're not saying, in saying that, we're not saying that the homelessness is a criminal activity. What we're saying is, number one, when you don't have a source of income, which almost everyone struggling with homelessness does not, largely because they're struggling with addiction and mental illness, they resort to crime in order to feed themselves, to fuel their addiction, to get a shower, to get a blanket, whatever the issue may be. So yes, there's a link in that way. But as we talked about it a little bit earlier, when diseases like addiction and mental illness go untreated, they worsen. And what the data shows is when you become more seriously mentally ill and addicted, you are much more likely to commit a serious, violent crime. Data is prolific in that regard.
So in terms of mental illness, is it a driver of homelessness, or can homelessness create an environment where developing a mental illness becomes more likely?
It is both. And I experienced that. I ran a program, the largest program in Northern California for 13 years for homeless women and children. And I saw where mental illness and addiction led to homelessness. I equally saw where the trauma experienced while homeless fueled mental illness and addiction. So it's not a, they are not mutually exclusive.
So on the suspect's case, a judge had released him, DeCarlos Brown Jr., on cashless bail. And this is after he agreed to the judge to show up for court at a later date. And we know he has a long criminal history, right? So in these instances where public safety is potentially at stake, how should the system balance the rights of individuals? These individuals sometimes with known risk factors. How do we balance that with the need to protect others?
Well, this president's executive order does just that. What he's saying is for 12 years, we've left mental illness and addiction, the often accompanying issues to homelessness, untreated, and it hasn't worked. Homelessness has risen, even though when they rolled this approach out in 2013, they promised it would end homelessness in a decade. Instead, homelessness has risen almost 35%. And the president recognized it's not working. We need to fund and in many cases require intervention. And that's what this executive order does. But the problem is we now have to build that system. This person should have never been on the streets. His mom requested more assistance. His stepbrother requested more assistance, and they didn't get it. And that's because there wasn't funding and there weren't programs to address this kind of situation. But we are now, with this, obviously the executive order happened several weeks before this incident happened. It's going to take us a while to build that system, but this president recognizes we can't continue on the path we've been doing, and he's put he's given us the right direction. Now we need to build the system.
Okay, so the president has suggested or floated the idea of the death penalty in this case. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not in the judicial system. I'm in the homelessness system, and I really believe, and I've seen, that's why I wrote my book. It's what I did for 13 years in running that program. I have seen people come back from the depths of despair to becoming homeowners as single mothers in California. So I believe in, rehabilitation. I believe in redemption. But I also believe in holding people accountable. And what happened in this case, I think many people across the country are looking over their shoulders in ways they've never done before after watching what happened to Irina, and I'm horrified by it. I'm not saying this individual can't get better, but he does need to be held accountable.
Okay, just one last question, and on the topic of responsibility, and you mentioned earlier that he should have gotten treatment, but he didn't. So, I mean, I don't want to play the blame game here, but where does the responsibility lie? Should the system have been better in treating him? Is it on the onus on the system of what happened here, or should the suspect be held more accountable? What is the balance between those two?
Yeah, well, the suspect absolutely needs to be held accountable. But, again, the other person that needs to be held accountable is President Obama, who, when he rolled out Housing First, our nation's homelessness approach in 2013 as a one-size-fits-all approach, he defunded and decoupled treatment from housing. And he promised that would end homelessness in a decade. And that has not happened. It's gone up 35%, and we're seeing more and more incidents like we saw with Irina all across the country. You and I talked about one a couple weeks ago where a gentleman with 17 priors, 27 years old, was in Central Park and nearly bit one man's ear off and set two others on fire. It's craziness. We're seeing the ramifications of ignoring these accompanying issues for so long. So yes, this individual absolutely needs to be held accountable, but we also need to hold accountable the people who put this system in place and swore it was going to end homelessness and who continue to support its failure.
Okay, well, Michelle, well said, I believe. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.